let's get started. If I can have everyone's attention, please. All right. Well, thank y'all for coming. So, some of us got here a little early and went fishing yesterday morning. So, and I think some of us went all day. But welcome to the. This is the 7th annual Stinson Summit that we've been putting on. So this is pretty awesome. I think we've got 19 planes out there I counted, and there are a few more that's coming in today that couldn't come in yesterday. Our first guest speaker this evening or this morning is going to be Robbie with Airtech. Yeah, come on up, Robbie.
Well, my name's Robbie Staton, and I own Airtech Coatings, which is a paint and fabric company. I've owned it for about 7 years, and I've restored planes off and on for probably 30 years while I was farming, until I decided I had to quit restoring and selling planes to support my farming habit. I finally got out of the farming, and got full-time. I was offered Airtech, and I was going to go ahead and just go full-time restoration, and then I was offered Airtech at that point. Met Jody. His business brings him in my area of the woods, and he was restoring a plane, and never really, like I mentioned before, I'm kind of into the Super Cubs, Pitts, Catabrias, that line of aircraft, and wasn't never really familiar other than with the Stinsons, other than walking down the roads at Oshkosh, and knew what they were, and stuff, and we at our shop, I'm with my cousin in a restoration shop, and we come to know a guy named from Washington, Steve Ruff. Anybody know of Steve? Yeah. So he's got the beat-all, end-all 108-3 with a 390 being built and everything. So he kind of introduced me more and more into the Stinson, and Jody asked me to come speak. And there's several people in here that's used Airtech, and he invited me to come do a speak on it, and I really just grabbed a few things when I left the house. I'm just down by Little Rock, and I didn't want to sit up here for 45 minutes, all the little intricate. I'll just give you a little bit of a highlight, and I did enough of these that I think it turns out better that we get into just a question and answer. There's no use in 90% of y'all hearing this just drone on about something to where they may have a question with stuff, and most of you already have your plane built and you're not restoring one at this time. So to just get you introduced with Airtech, it was Mr. Mack and Kenny Blaylock helped him back in the day in 1980, 1982, along in there. Got the STC for Airtech and was one of the first ones putting a urethane paint on fabric aircraft. And they used the database from Talkeetna, Alaska airframes or something up in there. They were kind of field approving doing a process similar to this. And they worked with Hershey, Storm Aeronautics now out in Nebraska, does all the ag work. All of the test was done on tail groups, on ag cats, crop dusters. Can't hardly find much of a worse condition to do testing on. And the STC came about in about 1982. And Mr. Mack was retiring about 7 years ago, and it was kind of just a weird thing that I decided to quit farming, drew the line in the sand and said, I'm struggling, I'm farming with the water level right here. I was making it, but I was just barely making it farming. And it was just, the older I got, it was just harder and harder to put your name on that loan. Here I am over here on the other side with the restoration, turning work away. So when I made the decision to start restoring planes and quit farming, within that week, Airtech was offered to me. So I think that there's a higher power was making me draw that line first. And I always joke with Mr. Mack, the reason he called me first, because he wanted to find somebody that has screwed up enough paint jobs that they'd be able to answer all the questions, and carry it forward. So with that, I knew that, and he told me, he said, He goes, just trade a plane $25,000 a year and move on. That'll be all the advertising you need. This is a different day and time. And I've got a nephew that helps me, and he does the social media side of it. Like I mentioned before, I'm into the STOL, the short takeoff planes and that sort of thing. And we've just used social media just to get the name out there. With our system, the main thing, and I was talking to a gentleman this morning, that he has it on his plane, that he noticed was it seemed like if you're used to some of the other systems, it seems like it's fewer steps with our system. That really resonates with a shop because they want to move on. We use any certified fabric. We don't put our name on another piece of Dacron because that cost me another 50 grand worth of testing or FAA stuff. Once you put the fabric on with our glue, which is PMA'd, like you do with any other system, then you shoot 3 coats of our primer, and it's made in-house. It's not an off-the-shelf primer. We've started making that in-house now. And sand it smooth and shoot 2 coats of paint and you're done. The problem I have is the mechanic or the guy that has covered planes, and I don't like to mention any systems, but he's covered planes for 40 years. He's turned out show winners for 40 years. That's my most problematic mechanics. Well, I don't understand because we always did this. I don't understand. They feel like they're missing out on something when they use our system. I got to do some more stuff. That's all the steps there is to it. Now, the guy that follows instructions, naturally, I do have guys that switched over from poly and different systems that follow the instructions and do great. I've had young guys that has never covered a plane before. They think they want to try it. They're scared to death. They've read the manual 50 times. We have videos, Fabric Tip Friday, the standard videos on our process. I need to count them. I think we've got over 100 videos. Every time I think of a little trick, that's a Fabric Tip Friday. They have mulled over those videos. They called me with not stupid questions, but questions that they're just nervous about. Man, I'm almost ready to mix paint, and I have questions. And next thing you know, I'm sitting at Oshkosh, and they go, my plane's parked in row Timbuktu. Well, you want to come look at my plane? Well, I've had emotional contacts with this guy for 2 years. I have to go look at his plane. I pull up, and I know what row he's supposed to be in. And if you're familiar with Oshkosh, I always thought, that would be the most romantic life, having a booth at Oshkosh. We stay in the booth. We stay in that trailer. That's been the worst nightmare. Sun and fun. I mean, when 5 o'clock comes, I got to get on a golf cart and I got to leave. I got to get away. So we go look at these planes. We pull up. I think I've told Jody about this. I'm like, I guess this is it. Crap. It's perfect. This thing is perfect, and I don't claim to be this high-end restoration. This thing is perfect. And then he comes by Sunday morning. I got a Lindy from my plane. The first timer, if he follows instructions, and I don't understand it, sometimes people just have the knack, and then you have the ones like me or my cousin. I can be sitting in Airtech, and Central Arkansas Aircraft Repair is 10 foot over, and I can hear the door on the paint booth slam, and I can hear, I just can't have nothing. Urethane is an accident in a can waiting to happen. When you get really used to something, it will do something stupid with you, and we can't explain that. But with our system, I feel like that the novice can get the shine. He may have some orange peel, he may have some runs, but like I told a gentleman this morning, he'll have the shiniest orange peel and runs out there. When you put the plane together out on that grass field, them little imperfections just go away. I mean, we pick ourselves to death in the paint booth looking at these little issues. So with that being, we sell to a lot of shops. That's a lot of our business. But with social media, I think we've kind of created a monster. Everybody, There's videos. I'm buying a carbon cub kit. I'm going to do it myself. You know, and I'll ask these same people, if you dent the fender on your Denali, are you going to do it yourself? Oh, no. I want a professional to do it. But you're going to build a $500,000 Cub yourself. And you've never painted before. And you've never, you know, and these are the guys that really get into it and go, what paint gun did you use? Tell me the number you turned it to. Tell me that, you know, that's like me saying, I'm going to buy a Martin D28 guitar because that's the guitar that this guy plays, and I'm going to learn on it. You know, it takes, as we know, it takes time holding a paint gun. You can't teach that. But with all the videos, I feel like the guy that wants to do it himself, and I've learned that there's something about doing it yourself. I think EAA, when they judge planes, they need to go back to how much was done yourself. If you hired your RV4 to be painted over here, and your upholstery to be done over here, and your engine to be done over there, and the avionics to be over there, now you're up there trying to get an award in an experimental association. It is what it is, but I have more respect for the guy that I did it myself. And that's that double-edged sword of what I was saying. We've created this monster that everybody tries. There's some people that don't need to. We do some seminars at home, 10 to 12 people, 2 days. I am hoarse at the end of 2 days. We cover every little, and it's not how do you do the backbone of a champ. I think we just did that on one of the Fabric Tip Fridays last week. On, you know, we don't get into how to do each plane. It's just the process. And I have guys all over the United States. It'll be him and his wife are at the seminar. And at the seminar, when I'm done, you know, and you always got the one guy in there that did some fabric work. You know, he's not paying attention. Yeah, I know. At the end of it, I'll usually point out, it'll be a man and a wife or something. I go, guys, I said, she has wrote 7 or 8 pages in the notebook that I provided. When I go, hey, listen up, here's an important tip, she gets the ink pen. You know, and usually the husband kind of scoots his chair back and goes, she's going to be the one covering it. Because I tell people, if I go to Mall Aircraft, I go to Patriot Aircraft, I go to a lot of these places. I don't know what it is. Kenny Blaylock was the same way with Special Product Aviation. When you went to the fabric room, there was at least 2 or 3 females involved with the covering of an airplane. There is something about, I don't understand it. They just do a better job than us guys, you know. So with that, when we do these seminars, I have guys that go, I feel more comfortable. I feel comfortable that when I pick the phone up, I'm going to talk to Janice, my wife, or I'm going to talk to Robbie, or Bailey, my daughter-in-law. I'm going to talk to somebody. I have someone that is going to be there with me. But what I really like is sometimes I'll have the guy that has spent the money. He's come halfway across the United States. He spent 2 days at the seminar. He spent all the money. And he calls me the next week. He goes, I respect the process of covering an airplane, and I don't think I want to do it. I don't think I can do it. I'm going to have a shop do it. Can you recommend one? I respect that as much as the guy that's going to wade off into it neck deep and get over his head, you know, covering a plane. So, you know, I'm out there to help everybody. We naturally like having shops, but we also have the new guy that's covering the family T-Craft, and they're never going to be back. So I have to use social media as constantly getting the next guy that's covering a plane. So, you know, we try to work with everybody. Our system, I tell everybody that I don't never knock any other system. You know, there's one out there that's kind of an oddball, but the main ones, you know, the Stewart system's a water-based system. It's a good system, but it's different. If you've ever dealt with water-based products, they're different. Guess what? I've covered some stuff with Stewart's system. I'm the guy that I mentioned a while ago that don't follow the instructions real good. I have to call Andy. I'm like, what in the world am I doing? Andy goes, you're supposed to be following the instructions, you know. It's a good system, but it's a different system. Molly's system, Superflight, that's as close to our system as far as the steps. You got the Ranthane, the polyfiber, everything that's consolidated is all these other systems, Ray Stitz, all these are under that big name. Now that's the elephant in the room. I mean, they're huge. I mean, you can knock systems if you want, but that's the biggie. I mean, we also cut tapes as far as making the tape, and we actually cut tapes for these other companies. That's my other business that I do. So I know how much they sell when they order tapes, and it ain't even any comparison. And people will go, well, why don't you get up there and tell them that Airtech is the best? And well, I own the company. I mean, I got to think it's good, but all four of the companies out there, Superflight and Stewart's and mine and all of the Polyfiber, they're all good systems. Some of them use a urethane. They're all shiny if they're done right. It's all about the flow and the way you lay the stuff out. A lot of guys go, well, I want mine to look original like the early, Cubs and stuff did. I want that flat look. I said, so you want it to look like it's been faded out. I spent a lot of time with, if any of y'all know Mr. Clyde, the Cub doctor, Clyde Smith. His dad worked at the Cub factory, and Clyde did in his younger days. When they built the Cubs in 1946, you could pay like $75 or $100 and have it buffed. Dope will kind of shine. It's a little different kind of shine, but it'll shine. And I joke with everybody, the reason that they didn't have urethane shiny paint in 46 because they didn't have urethane paint in 46. I mean, it's just the way it is. If they could have had it, I guarantee you, Mr. Piper would have had shinier planes than he did. They're using what they used. I understand that look. People ask me about flattening our paint. There's some products that you can use to flatten a urethane, but now you're making something, it's like a Corvette is made to do what a Corvette's going to do, but we're going to design a few road anchors to slow it down like a dozer. It's just not going to do well. They're not going to do well when you flatten them. But with that said, our system is the only system left out there that once you put this primer on, you've satisfied my STC. I've got guys that puts Ranthane because they're just used to the way Ranthane paints. They go, this system, Ranthane on top. Most people want this to get to here. They want our paint, so I don't have many of them does that. The FAA kind of give me a little, I don't know about that. I'm like, well, a lot of things FAA don't know, but all the systems used to be, as long as you put the silver on, polyfiber, you've seen silver planes, they're done. Now this is the guy that owned it before me, a little bragging point. He goes, well, when Airtech come out, we were just smoking them. He goes, we were selling paint to all the other systems because they was putting it on it. So all the other systems changed and said, you got to go all the way through our paint to get our STC. Then it got to the point that they were going, all right, I'm going to build a J3, and I've already started this other system, and I'm going to go all the way through their system with one coat of white. Now I'm going and put a big yellow Airtech stripe on my J3. They're going to play the system one way or the other. So ours is still that way because most people don't use a different top coat. And I can usually refer them to a lusterless type. There's some mil-spec paints out there that is flat looking. Most of the time when someone says they want it flat, they're building an L4 and they're wanting chalkboard flat. If you put something in a urethane paint to make it flat, what you're doing is putting something in it to come to the surface to make the reflection break up, which is basically starch. When you do that, you've opened that surface to create, it could crack or could something happen. Now I got some customers that does warplanes, they use Airtech, and they said, hey, I've been using this as a chalky for an L4. I've got planes 22 years out there and they're not cracked yet. Well, that's my test. It's one thing for a company to go, we guarantee this for 30 years. I said, you've had tests? No, but we just know that it'll last 30. But if you got a guy that says, I got 22-year-old Cubs out there that are doing good and they're not cracking, I feel comfortable telling someone, go through this and then order this and put on top of it. Now, if they go put porch paint on top of that, don't call me that it's not doing right. I mean, so it's there's always ways around, not to be illegal with the FAA, but there's always ways to maneuver things. You know, I have the guy that I call, I've done started with this process and I want to switch to yours. Well, I know that it will work. Systems are not out there so far apart that one drop of one's going to ruin the other. But we have to follow the STC, and as the IA mechanic, that's where it's going to lay in his boat. You know, he's going to have to at some point sign that I covered this aircraft using the Airtech STC manual 101 AT revision, you know, down the line. He's basically laid it on the line that he did something. And, you know, I see it all the time. You look inside and there's pink, and it says it was done with Airtech. Well, I know there's pink polybrush under it, you know. I've had guys that call that I've seen all this stuff on Facebook and I've got to try Airtech. I sell them, you know, a plane they're doing. I think the guy was doing a PA-12. Well, he calls me back. He goes, this stuff's amazing. He goes, I think the things, I mean, for my first time using it, had a few little hiccups, but it's going to turn out great. He goes, but you didn't send me everything I needed, but I got by. Well, whoa, why didn't you call me? What, you know, and I'm pulling his name up the whole time, looking at his invoice and stuff. He goes, well, you didn't send me any polybrush at all. But I had some. Okay. I'm like, well, they don't use polybrush. That's another. Well, then he got all nervous, and so I was like, it'll be all right. You know, you're going to do it. You've ever heard of double cover, which is basically we're putting one pinking tape over the whole airplane, and it's always that beginner wants to double cover, and I'm like, no, man. I even have problems with it sometimes. The legality of it, it's not in my wheelhorse to say you can or can't. You can make the argument. I'm putting reinforcement tapes on all the ribs, so I'm just going to put a reinforcement tape over the whole thing. Who's to say that's right or wrong? You know, the experimental world, we kind of get out there on some areas, you know. But like I said, my main thing is always there to help. And like I said before, Steve Ruff's aircraft's next door in the shop. He's got like 70 field approvals. But then again, this guy will field approve a riv nut. He's an engineer by trade, so you got to know Steve, you know. I mean, I just hope the plane will get finished, you know, someday. But it's funny. There's not a greater guy than Steve, and it says joke between us. We're always joking, you know, about when the plane's going to be done. He's back up in Washington now, but he's coming back in October. So I've met a few of y'all by coming by the shop to visit Steve, you know, and stuff. So he is a very wealth part of knowledge. I mean, if you want to know something about a Stinson, Steve will rattle it off, you know, so stuff. So that's been between Noah and Jody and different ones. But I can use the rest of the part of the time. If people's got questions, not just the normal little questions, I can use this time to get a little in depth. You know, what I do is when people talk about going to cover their plane with a Stinson, I can send them what I call a fat quote. It's going to look a little more expensive than some of the other people's quote, but you're not going to dollar yourself to death. Another quart of glue, another quart of glue, another gallon of primer. You know, I had a customer that come to me covering a Super Cub, and he goes, Super Flight beats you by $600, and money's money. Well, then he comes by 2 years later, he goes, man, I spent $1,000 more dollars. You know, I'm like, well, I can make mine look small to be competitive, then I don't look as good. You know, it's like when I quote someone to restore a plane, I'm going to give you the honest quote, and if I come in 5,000 under, I'm a hero, but if I come in 10,000 over, now I'm a bad guy, and if that number's the same, it was the same all the way through. So I sent a quote, and I think that I normally put a Stinson a little more than a Super Cub. It's a little bigger plane, you know, so you're probably looking at mid-6s. You know, we have a new top coat that we started this year. It's still a urethane. We had a place in Ohio that made this primer. And when I first bought Airtech, I walked in to buy some glue. It was in Jacksonville, one town over. I've covered with all the other systems, and I ended up going back to Airtech, not just because it was one town over, but it was what I was used to using. I walked in and Matt goes, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "Well, I come by." I was one of the guys that I hate that shows up. I like someone to call and tell me you're coming, or I show up. "Miss Wilma, I need some glue," you know. She has to call down there and put it together. He goes, "I was just going to get her to call you." Next thing you know, I'm in his office on a Tuesday. Me and my wife owned Airtech Thursday. That's the way that deal kind of worked. So you call and you get a quote. When I say a fat quote, it's going to be enough to pretty well cover everything you're doing. And to go back to that, you know, I thought, now I'm going to find out what Airtech uses for primer. I just knew it was an Axalta something hidden number. I ended up going to the place that was making this stuff, and when I'm in a little conference room, one of the guys in there, one of their chemists goes, "Oh," he goes, "So you're Airtech PFU 1030 primer." He goes, "Do you realize what we have to go through to make that?" And sure enough, Mac and their chemists, I think they changed this primer again in 1994. They actually came up with the best of a lot of worlds primer, and it was a mixture of only our own. This is not a direct to metal, this has not got a chemical adhesion to do anything like a normal primer. This is designed to go in the fabric and grab a hold of it, just like a glue. You know, nothing will glue to Synconite or the Dacron. It goes in it and holds. Well, 2 years ago, I got a call from this small company, and they were making our pigment, literally making our pigments, which was an older urethane that Mac had picked that wouldn't catalyze as hard and it was flexible. They said, "We just got bought out by a company called Axalta, and their bean counter come through last month." Went through the books, and they said, "Why are you still making this pigment for only 2 places? And what's this over here called a primer that you're making?" Well, you know what happened. Tell them to order whatever they're going to need, and we're done. So now I got another chemist. I went up there, and then they got a little funny on my formula. It's my formula. They got funny on giving it to me. I'm like, I don't want to turn the jackass button on, but but one of the guys I talked to, it was literally, he left his laptop turned on. He goes, "I'm going to the bathroom." But we went through this whole deal, so we got dispersing mixers that we make all this now. But we couldn't get these pigments made, so I went with another company that works through PPG for the pigments. We've got them matched over. The mixture's a little different. Instead of 3-to-1, it's 6-to-1-to-1. It's 2 kinds of hardeners now, and one part of the hardener is temperature related. Makes it a little complicated for the old guys, but you know what? If you turn our can around, the first sentence in the can on the back said, "This product's to be used by a professional only." And if you can't figure out a mix ratio, maybe you don't need to be painting. But we've had really good luck with it. We've got guys that has done some Super Cubs, some Javrons up in Idaho that has said they've did it in a single shot of white, one single shot. It really covers well. It flows out well. The only issue we've had is Legend Aircraft, the Cub place down in Sulphur Springs. Ron got some paint from me 2 or 3 times, and he was shooting in 94 degrees, and he was having some solvent pop issues. So we kind of revamped some stuff. I went to another source and had some reducer made that was, we got a 4070 and a 4085. We made a 4095, which is almost like 3-in-1 oil. But we got it to where it would flow out, and so that's some of the little issues we've had, but we do have a new top coat. We've crossed about most of the current colors that most people use. I do like it because you can give me a Jeep number that you like that color, and being that I have now, since I'm using some PPG products from the Delfleet line, I've got access to PPG's everything. Pull up these numbers, and or I can colorize something. And people, Jody has mentioned he gets a lot of people talk about matching colors, and they'll I've literally had them send me the label to a peanut butter jar, or, something like, I like that color. So the way it goes now, I can, used to, I just had to kind of try to make it, and I'd do a color eye, and it'd go, hey, you need a little more red and a little more blue. That's all it would tell me. Now I can color eye it. It ain't going to really give me a formula, but what it does, it looks in the whole world of everything, and it might go, an 86 Fiat truck has a color close to that, and a whatever, it's this one. And these numbers go from 10 all the way to 1. 1's a perfect match, but if it's a 3 or a 4, that's pretty close. And it'll give me that formula. So I go mix a little bit of that formula, and that's kind of the way I'm probably an hour process getting a color match. But when you got a color that you want me to color eye and do, I can do that. I don't charge for it. It's kind of aggravating when you end up spending 3-4 hours. You've probably mixed and threw away 4 pints of paint, and you finally pour it down on a card and you mail it to them, and they go, that's it. Could you send me a pint of it? Okay, so it is what it is. I mean, so it gets loaded in as a new number, and it may be Jody Blue or whatever. If it's, I have to put it in the system, so if, and I have a problem with mechanics that'll put in the logbook, covered with Airtech. That's all they'll put color codes, put stuff for the next guy. I want to use the last little bit of time, questions, what you're building or whatever.
Robbie, tell a little more in detail of the glue and kind of how that works. I know after I was introduced to your product, I was pretty well impressed with how it brushes on, and then you lay your fabric down, and then you put that on the fabric, and it rejuvenates that, and then it starts bonding together.
Yep.
And it doesn't put off the fumes.
Yeah, our UA55, it's a consistency of K-Row. It's thicker than K-Row when it comes out of the can. But we use the same glue that you would use Polytac or Super Seam or Polybrush or whatever. It's the same glue. We mix it 1 part glue, 2 parts reducer, and it's an acetone-based reducer. That's for putting your structure on, and 1 part to 3 part for putting tapes on. With our system, if you have a wing or say a fuselage here, you take the thicker part, and if you've ever used polyfiber or whatever, you brush it on, then you lay the fabric in it, and then you brush it on. Now you got a little place where you got a seam. You just brush everywhere glue is going to go, and it completely dries. Then you drape your fabric over it, then you take the thin glue and you just wet it through. It soaks through, it reactivates itself, cut it, brush it in. So it's pretty easy. I have a big percentage of people, not going to name any names, but they are polyfiber people, but they buy glue. They buy glue. I know what they're doing. They go, your glue is just it. And I have guys that buy our primer only. That's all they buy is primer. What are you using? I don't care what you're using it for. If that credit card's good, send it out. So the glue, really a lot of people like the glue. I have a seminar. I have these 4 tables plumb full of people doing stuff in an enclosed room. The smell don't, because you're not doing but a little bit on a tape. It ain't like, if you do the polybrush on a whole wing, it gets a lot of area. It gets pretty strong. There's not an issue with the fumes. The tapes, the biggest thing I get is because it's clear. And the guys go, I can't see where I've been. I'm like, well, you're brushing. I mean, it's wet. It's just, that's where you've been. They want to see that green or that color. Superflights is green colored. But you put down, you mark the tapes lines perfectly. And I tell people the biggest fault with Airtech is you can't be sloppy. Because when we go from stretched fabric, we go right to primer. So if you've let your glue line do all of this, you fill the weave with glue. You spray the primer, now the primer soaks into the fabric, but it stands on top of the glue. Now you can see all that. Now you're having to sand that little glue edge down. So you got to mark the lines, pencil lines. You put down a coat of thin, and by the time you come to this rib, that one's dry. You put down a second coat of thin glue, and what we're doing is going into the fabric. If you just go on top of the fabric, you've probably seen samples where someone peels the paint right off of the silver or peels of silver and you see perfectly white fabric on a 30-year-old cover job, the first coat of poly never went into the weave. They didn't get adhesion to it. You come to the third coat of thin, you can have your tape cut and you can wet it through the tape. That works. I like having the tape cut laid to the side, wet it, lay the tape in it, and then take the palm of my hand, and that ensures you pushing it around the stitch or around the rivet. You don't have those hollow. You have a little bit of hollow spots, but it's not a big deal. You lay it in the glue and then pick your glue up at that point and put that fourth one down, and then come back with a fifth one. And there's 5 passes of glue.
So when you put your pink tape on there, that glue is going to be on the fabric in between those notches. So does that cause a problem with the final or the primer coat?
No, what I do is I take a piece of tape, say it's 2-inch tape, cut me one, fold it over, get a perfect center mark my rib, draw my lines, and you want that glue line to be probably 1/8 of an inch past the tip. If you put it right to the tip, you have all these, the tips are not glued down, and when you spray, they're standing up. And I got videos on taking a razor, cutting them off, and then sanding them, or super glue with a toothpick, you know, and it don't matter. I have them all the time. On a wing, I may have 3 pieces of pink, they're just standing up for some reason. When you're ironing them, you do not put an iron on that tape. People think they want to, you're shrinking that tape, now you sheared your glue joint. You may have stuck it back, but you sheared it. And that tape's going to come off in 3 years, 2 years, whatever. You only take an iron on the tips. So I have guys that go, they say, oh, my tape's coming loose. Well, how much glue did you put? Well, I put 5 coats. And you get to talking to them. Most of the time, they're automatically, human response is, I did it by the book. I did it by the book. Well, keep talking. I'm going to wait and I'm going to hear this red flag come up, you know. Well, I put that glue down, I put that tape in, and I put 4 more coats of glue. I said, 4 coats of glue on top of the tape did nothing for under the tape. And that thin glue, that first coat of thin glue, you can still feel the weave. It's like there's nothing really there. You put the second coat of glue, you're starting to get a little rubbery. You're just wanting to, you let that acetone carry that glue in deeper. And then you put that third one on. Kenny Blaylock always wanted me to put enough glue on that I could run my finger across and I could feel a ridge line. That's a little much, but it's not coming off. And then you're wetting in that top. Then you have to put one more on top to finish kind of filling that weave, or you could have pinholes. People will say, well, why am I going to get pinholes on that when you're spraying raw fabric on the raw fabric, primer on the raw fabric over here? I said, because there's nothing under the fabric. The primer's hitting the fabric and it's just soaking on through. If you did enough of it, it might drip. I mean, you're going through. But if you've got glue under it, your primer hits it. All of those little weaves, not microscopically, but really small, there's a little pocket of air that's wanting to pop back out this way. So, you know, like I said, when I mark those tapes, you know, and they're pretty well on. I know the idiot that cuts the tapes, so they may not be perfect in size. They might be 2 1/16 inch, or so don't go up there and just do a bunch of 2. You know, use the tape that you're going to use to get your width. I'm going to pass this around. I don't know if there's anybody into it. It's really the Cub world, the Champ world. These guys are into these concourse, period correct, you know, restorations. If you're very familiar with cotton, nobody uses cotton anymore, but the old cotton tapes was a smaller pinked edge. And like in Belanca in 72, when they were building Champs, they were using Sinconite, but using cotton tapes. I got one video on showing how the cotton's rotten, but the Sinconite's still good on that red airplane, doing a mold test, how the cotton was just falling apart. But they're trying to build a plane, and Clyde Smith got me started on this. They want that look. So when I bought this company with the machines that we make the tapes, we found that we could buy the cutting wheels that look like the old cotton tape. So we offer a vintage tape for the guy that wants it to look like the vintage. And just pass this around. It just gives you an idea of what the vintage looks like. And all you do is just tell me that, hey, I want my 108 Stinson, I'm building it and all this, but I want vintage looking tapes. And it's no better or no worse. What it is so you can stand there and you can scratch that ground when that judge is looking and you can go, look at that. That's not cotton. I did this and made it to, and they're impressed by that kind of stuff, you know. So you can make it sound like you had something specially done to make it look like it. Any more questions?
How often do you have your sessions, your training programs?
We do 2 or 3 a year. I have people that just come by, like when you've came by before. If you give me a day or two ahead, and if he's doing some fabric work, usually I can sit down with you in an hour or two in one-on-one and get you comfortable with what you're doing. If we do a 10 or 12 person, I charge $400 for a 2-day deal, and you get that back on a discount when you start buying materials. We do 2 or 3 a year. What I normally do, you know, I could have scheduled one this week last February, and I'd have been messed up for coming here. So I don't like stretching out and locking in anything like that. What I'll do is usually in December or so, I'll say, hey, end of February or January or 1st of February, let's maybe have one. And I'll have guys that'll call and say, I want on the next one. So I got a notebook. I'm a pencil and ledger type guy. And I just write their name down. So I say, okay, we're gonna have one starting in end of January on this weekend, Friday and Saturday. Well, I'll call those guys and say, hey, do you want on board? Yay or nay? So they start the list. I'll put it on Instagram. If you follow Instagram or Facebook, you can get most of our Fabric Tip Fridays, anything that's going on. I'll put it out there, say at 9 o'clock. I'll fill the seminar that evening, usually. They're like, man, I'm 99% sure. Put my name down, you know. So now I'm building a list. So then I go back the next day. I go, hey guys, since I got the table set up, since I'm set up that weekend, we're going to do one the next weekend. Well, now then some of these guys, well, that first weekend was pressing me, but that second one was better. Move me to the second one, and then you got the guys, oh, I missed that, but I won't. And I usually fill up a 2-week in a row deal. And like I said, as far as how often, 2 or 3 times a year. We don't do the stuff at Oshkosh. If I set you at Oshkosh and let you cover a little square frame and you feel you're not ready to cover an airplane, you know, you leave there. And I tell them stitching, I said, go down to Polyfiber's booth where they're stitching, just do it there. You know, I'm not going to have a seminar. We'll cover stitching a little bit, but you can learn stitching about anywhere. We get into the other parts of it. Any other questions?
So can the primer go from fabric to metal?
Nope.
Just fabric?
Just fabric. There's some guys that use it on fiberglass parts, but you want to really rough it up. You want about a 320, 280 grit for a mechanical bond. They'll use it because it does build up good like a 2K, a Nason 2K primer or something that has a lot of build to it. People will use it in that sense. I got a guy called me. He said, man, this primer, he goes, I come in mad. He goes, we just did a set of wings on an 802 crop duster. And he goes, my guys put your primer on the metal.
Now, you do have a primer for metal.
We have a 1-to-1 epoxy direct to metal in a gray or a white. That way, if you're painting a yellow airplane, you see the color of our primer, and their epoxy's that color. So if you paint a yellow right over that, you don't get a color change or anything. So yeah, our primer is not a direct to metal. It has it's mostly just resins for flexibility, and the desmophin resins react with a catalyst to dry, and that's basically it. When we come up with that new top coat, the industry standards is a urethane has finally dried or cross-linked when you can spray it, wait 7 days, take MEK, wipe it 25 times, and no color will come off. Well, I started testing some of these products through the Dell fleet that says mix it 3-to-1. I mixed it and sprayed it 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 6-to-1, 8-to-1, 10-to-1. 10-to-1 cross-linked 100%, which tells me that is too fast and too brittle at 3-to-1. You can mix it 3-to-1, do the hood of your Peterbilt. It will snap like a potato chip. It's not good for this. So I will come up with I did the redneck. I'm a high school graduate, that's it. But I'm like, hey, here's another primer that's catalyst that's this. And then I talk, and if you ever call someone like PPG and tell them that you're going to monkey with their stuff, whew, they will almost tell you what to do, but they won't quite tell you what to do. Because I had to come up with I had the formulation for catalyst. It's very simple. It's all polyisocyanates, just different levels. But you have to have nitrogen-filled stuff because oxygen is trying to make it hard, go bad on its own. So I just buy off the shelf, but I have to buy the right one. So we had to pick one to go with our mix on this because they quit making it. Got bought by Exalta, so they're not doing it. So I come up with a Part C, and that's the complicated part is, as you call me, what's your temperature? Well, we're at 80 or 90 degrees. Okay, you're going to need the very warm. Well, they end up painting in December. I said, man, just don't order your paint till you're ready because they'll never fail. They won't never match up with the temperature. And that's kind of the downfall of our new paint. When I give you the quote, it's not, we don't have a Stinson 108 kit boxed up. It's just amounts of stuff. You can pick and choose and add to and take away. Hey, send me everything through the glue, no primer. Send me everything through the primer or whatever. Are you riveting or stitching your wing? Okay, I'm doing that. So this kit is just an estimate. So, but yeah, that's the catalyst that we come up with, I think is working really well. And you either are very, very, very chemical resistant or you're very, very flexible. You can't have both. If someone tells you that we're the most flexible and the most chemical resistant, you got to pick on that timeline from 1 to 10 to be where you need to be. And I think with some of these new products, instead of me taking my finger and going, we're a 6, I think it's where I can lay my hand on there and go, we're from a 5 to a 7. Because I watched Kenny Blaylock get overspray on an Airtech plane in the shop. And this is when I was learning Airtech in the wintertime when I wasn't farming. We actually took rags and gallon buckets of acetone and washed that plane down hard. Didn't affect nothing. So it's pretty chemical resistant. If you got a leak and it's been leaking for 4 days and you finally walk in the hangar and find it and there's blue, I'm sorry. It don't matter whose blue avgas stain is blue avgas stain. It goes in the paint. As we talked, some people will sand it back and rebuff it. You can kind of, but ours, it's a non-buffable. This new stuff is more buffable, but there's something, if you're a paint guy, there's something about a fender of a car of you taking it to 5,000, 8,000 buffing compounds, or you trying to buff that. There's not a hard surface there to buff, and it's really hard to buff a single stage urethane.
Another question. You mentioned stitching a while ago, and I know on the Stinson they use the little screws to put the fabric on the wing. Can you or somebody here talk about, is it legal to use strip stitching instead of those screws?
That's where it leaves. Our STC doesn't tell you about whatever the 4313 would tell. It's like a maul. If you do a maul tail like maul's supposed to be, you don't cover a tail and stitch it. You cover over each rib, overlap 3 inches, cover over the rib, overlap 3. That's a pain in the butt to do that way. It's a neat look. Is it legal to cover a maul tail and stitch it? I don't think there's an FAA guy out there who knows the difference. And then we all know it's good. I love that there's keywords on the internet. PK screws and the champ people. Powder coat. There's water-based, there's these keywords that they want to, they know some words to really jump on the bandwagon. The PK screws, I've had so much trouble taking them out. They've made the hole weird size. We sell a fabric rivet that's not cupped, it's flat. Number 30 drill, all you're doing is just opening the hole up. I tell people, I go, what did a Citabria evolve from? A champ. A new Citabria uses rivets. My little clip wing cub is a 47. I clipped it and I got a field approval out of Little Rock, Arkansas last year. I mean, I'm this guy on the clip wing cub. They go, you got a field approval in 2023. I said, from Little Rock Fisdo. A clip wing is a Lippard clip wing wood spar. It's almost just, it's a logbook entry. Metal spar, that's a field, and nobody, and there's some old field approvals. There's some stuff out there. You can't find it. So all I did was, instead of saying I clip wing this 47 model, except it's a metal wing and I clip wing the metal wing, Steve Ruff helped me fill it out. I clipped the wing on this J3 because the type certificate has not changed all the way through 45, 47. I clipped the wing on this 47 using the Lippard clip wing process, everything that was done, with the exception of, and I did not say it's got a metal wing, with the exception of the wings was a superseded part number from 1946 to 1947, therefore they switched to a metal spar, a superseded part number. So the Champ, guess what? When it went to Belanca and Champion, they started putting rivets in instead of PK screws. I tell people, just, put a screw in. Steve is wanting to use rivets, but if you've looked at the top of a Stinson rib, it's got a groove in it. I told Steve, I can drill right into that and put a rivet and set right on top of that. But Steve has had 025 aluminum laser cut to set and glue in that groove to make it flat across the top. It's going to be nice. What I say? It's going to be perfect. It's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
But that's the only thing of riveting. I told him, I think you could stitch it. The airplane's not real fast. It's not. I don't think there's anything that makes it to where, other than the edge of that rib. That's like the guys that does the stamped rib. Stamped rib's just ideal for riveting. I still stitch them, but guess what? We sand the edge of that stamped rib. We take a little bit of clear packing tape, maybe 3/8. We encapsulate the end. We don't want that stitch to do on that edge. Well, Bill Pancake has an STC to stitch a Champ wing. He proved to him that once you've stitched it, once you've put all that glue in the hole and everything, it's locked. It ain't working. So I'm not going to stand up here and say go for it, but I don't think there's a thing in the world wrong with stitching it,
And I've seen planes, 108s that have had rivets put in it, other than the PK screws. They not stitch it. They not stitch the ribs. No, they've used rivets, and I think part of it's going to be what your IA is going to be comfortable with. That's going to sign it off. To do that, but it goes both ways. You can look at, is a screw better than a rivet?
Well, we come up to the pressure difference. You got the Airtech guy says that their glue's so good, you don't have to stitch it all.
Yeah.
And I got guys on there that says, well, I'm building a pitch with a 300 horse, and Airtech said I don't have to glue, so we're not going. I said, you're not going to glue a wing of a 300 horse pitch. We're not talking about enough pressure. It's just like what he said. If you're not an IA, don't throw your IA under the bus and got the airplane putting oil in it going, can you come sign stuff off? You're supposed to have a pre-cover signature in there. And that's why Steve, like I said, if any of y'all get near Little Rock, Arkansas, if you're going down Interstate 40, call Airtech, come over and look at Steve's airplane. You just wouldn't believe this, glass cockpit, everything. But he's wanting just to, which we're the IAs. I don't care. He can put bubble gum under it. I don't really care. But he's cut these parts to put in. And that solves that little groove. I showed him where it's going to be fine because you're putting a reinforcement down and then you're putting the rivet through that. But he wanted it right. So that's what he did, was had laser cut just the right width of aluminum, sets right in the top of that groove. Now he's got a flat top. He could drill it and put a screw through both pieces or use the rivet, either way. I got some brochures. We've got a new manual. This is the old manual that has the old paint mixes in it. I get rid of them. If you want a manual, it's got most of the basics parts of our system. Feel free to have one, normal Airtech. We also sell hard deck floor system, which is a epoxy and a clear that's hot tire proof. You can put a hot tire on it and it don't make a black mark, and stuff. A lot of guys that, you're looking at about $1 a square foot for all the products and stuff to put it down. And like I said, I got some hats if anybody wants a hat.